They have I think, is Jim Marshall still on the team? They do have Jim Marshall, who I don't think is in the Hall of Fame actually, and it's one of the more sad things about one of the bigger snubs in NFL history is that he's not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They have Alan Page, one of the greater defensive tackles of all time. You know, this team throughout the 70s was made to win, and they did it well. Just a dynamic roster from top to bottom, and like I said, in the first round, like, not as successful of a Vikings team as you would think. And actually, in the first round, I'm glad I get to bring up the Buccaneers again, because in the first round we spoke on how horrible that team was, and how they basically had no business being an NFL team. Well, the Vikings only beat the Buccaneers 9-3, and the Buccaneers actually came pretty close to winning this game, or at least having more of a stake in it. So the Buccaneers and Vikings play in week 2, and the Vikings are up 2-0 in the second quarter, because of course they are. Of course they were somehow able to get a safety. The Buccaneers drive all the way to the Minnesota 1-yard line. They're inches away from scoring a touchdown, their first touchdown of the season, and taking the lead against the Vikings, the Fran Tarkenton-led Vikings, the Alan Page, Jim Marshall, Purple People Eaters defense. But for some absolutely ridiculous reason, on third down, they send out their quarterback, what's his name, Randy Hedberg. They send out Ricky Bell, who's in his second NFL game. He was taken with the first pick in the NFL draft. And they're going to run a running play, and they're gonna snap the ball back like you would on the 1-yard line, like the Seahawks should have done in that Super Bowl and given Marshawn Lynch the ball. They're gonna do it, but for some reason the fullback doesn't go on the field, so the Buccaneers only have 10 players on the field. And so the quarterback, Randy Hedberg, he had already wasted all 3 timeouts and their first half timeouts, because he was confused about other plays throughout the first half. So he can't call a timeout. So he looks and turns around, and Ricky Bell's there, and Ricky Bell's kind of like, I don't know what's going on. So instead of handing it off, which I think would have been a no-brainer, he decides to try a quarterback sneak, and it doesn't work out. And John McKay's explanation, the Buccaneers head coach, is that the fullback was picking his nose on the sideline. Apparently, the Buccaneers had 2 fullbacks, because it's 1977 and you need two fullbacks on your roster, and neither of them wanted to take the blame. They claimed that nobody told them to go on the field. So, if you look,
insane, dude.
So the Buccaneers had to settle for a field goal. Again, they could have gone for it on 4th down. They were at the 1-yard line, but it's 1977. People don't try things like that. And so they kick an 18-yard field goal and go up 3-2. The Vikings later score a touchdown and win the game 9-3. But if the Buccaneers had scored a touchdown there and gone up 7-2 at that point, and maybe got some sort of crazy last-second drive and gotten a field goal or something, there's a very real chance if the Buccaneers could have won this game and later down the road actually made the Vikings miss the playoffs. So I think for that alone, to me, this game that they almost lost to the Buccaneers, whereas meanwhile the Bears have Walter Payton. They don't have the greatest quarterback situation. They don't have the greatest defense, but they got the MVP on their team. They have Walter Payton, right? And against the Buccaneers, Walter Payton and the Bears showed up. They shut them out 10-0, which isn't a great score, but they sure as heck didn't have the Buccaneers at the 1-yard line, only missing a touchdown because the fullback was picking his nose. So I think this is a close one. I think a lot of people would probably pick the Vikings, but I would be rooting for the Bears on this one.
You had me up until you reminded me that the Bears only scored 10 points against the Buccaneers. That, to me, is still considered a loss, just like the Vikings nearly blowing into them is a loss. Like, 10-0 isn't enough cushion for me to think you've made a slam dunk case, Nathaniel. You needed to remind me that they blew out the Bucs 31-0 off the heels of 500 Walter Payton yards. And I don't know where I'm at, because to me it is incredibly close. Statistically, it favors the Vikings slightly, but both these teams clearly, their records, I think, are better than their actual advanced statistics. I think they left a lot to be determined. The two things that I'm leaning towards the Vikings is, one, a stupid point. They both got eliminated by the Dallas Cowboys in the postseason, but the Vikings lost by 10 points less than the Bears. So thus, Vikings better than Bears. But no, the real one is, the Vikings had 4 Pro Bowlers on their roster, and that doesn't include Jim Marshall. That doesn't include Fran Tarkenton. That doesn't include Ahmad Rashad. The Bears only had one other Pro Bowler other than Walter Payton. This was a one-man football team. And that's why it's hard for me to come out here and pick the Bears over the Vikings. So, despite the case you provided, Nate, in this matchup, I'm going to advance the Vikings.
All right. I think I had forgotten that the Bears only beat the Buccaneers 10-0 until I looked at the score and I was like, whoa, that is not what I thought I was going to see. That's not what I thought I was going to see. You guys let me down. And as I'm looking at that game, both of those scores, the field goal and the touchdown, came in the fourth quarter. So the Bears went 3 scoreless quarters against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
You had me until you read that score, and I completely flipped back to the Vikings, bro.
If I had not even brought up the score, would you have gone with the Bears? Man.
I was literally feeling it. And then when you said the score, it brought me back down to earth.
I couldn't really care less about the Bears, but this is like, man, it's crazy to know. I really thought I was going to see that score and it was going to be like 31-7 or something.
Yeah.
But 10-0.
Damn, they only scored 10 points. Yeah.
That's not pretty.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the worst games I think anyone had to witness because, like I said, 3 scoreless quarters that people had to sit through. All right. Well, the Vikings move on then.
Okay, my turn next.
You get.
Okay. Okay, the Cleveland Browns. And Denver Broncos. Oh man, I lucked out here. I mean, if you go against the Browns here, if you go against the Broncos here, you're on crack cocaine. I mean, first and foremost, the Browns were the worst team in their 4-team division. They advanced to this round because of an easy matchup. The one thing about the Browns is they had a respectable offense. Brian Sipe was a good quarterback. He could move the ball up and down the field, but they're matched up with the Orange Crush defense, 12-2. Denver Broncos, Dallas Cowboys. These were the 2 elite teams this year. No other team had a 12-win record other than the Broncos or the Cowboys in the regular season. The strength of this Broncos was it's one of the best defenses we've seen in the history of the league. It just was. So you put a good Browns offense against one of the best defenses in the 70s, I'll take the Denver Broncos, and they have a solid offense. I mean, the offense of the Broncos is generally equal to the offense of the Browns. Give me the Broncos here.
Yeah, I think you don't really have to say much more than that. I mean, the Broncos are they were built to win in 1977, and that's what they did. They went all the way to the Super Bowl, their first one in franchise history. The Browns kind of floundered throughout the year. They had a pretty bad start, or they had a pretty good start to the year, and then it kind of all fell off. These two teams did not face each other in that season, but if they had, I think it's without a question the Broncos would have pulled through.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what you got. I hope you have nothing but tough matchups.
It's gonna be really funny when at the end of this we got Broncos, Cowboys.
I know. This is how every episode goes.
We just picked the Super Bowl win. I wonder if in future ones we should like eliminate the Super Bowl teams.
Well, then that would just, I don't know. Okay, the Houston Oilers.
Wonderful. And the Raiders.
Okay.
All right. Hey, 1970s Raiders. I don't think there are many teams that were as good as they were in the decade, especially in the second half of the decade. Again, John Madden, one of the better coaches, a Hall of Fame coach, Hall of Fame broadcaster. I think one of the best people ever to be around football, without a question. They go 11-3 this year. It's one of their better years in the decade, and they play against the Oilers and they beat them 34-29 in Week 9. And so I know you can't necessarily say that because a regular season matchup that's exactly how it would play off and match out in the playoffs. But the Raiders, had this dynamic offense with Ken Stabler. They had just a great attack that they were able to pull through with. They had Rob Carr. They had and they had so many great players on their defense as well. So to me, without a question, it would have to be the Raiders. Believe it or not, this is one of the more off years for them in terms of defensive stuff, because they're only 14th in points allowed and 15th in points in yards allowed. But their offense is so great at this time. They're first in scoring. They're second in yardage. On the ground, they're really good. They have the second best rushing attack, only behind the Chicago Bears, and they're led by a fullback named Mark Van Egan, who honestly I'd never heard of until I was looking up this team. But he was there and a very serviceable guy for the Raiders. Had 3,000-yard seasons with them. This 77 season is the only one where he actually gets to go to the Pro Bowl, back when that actually mattered. He makes the All-Pro team, or he actually makes the second All-Pro team. They have a guy named Dave Casper, who is remembered for the Ghost play, which is one of the more memorable plays in the 1970s. And then, like I said, their defense had some great players on it. I know they didn't put up great numbers in this season, but they got Fred Biletnikoff, they got Willie Brown, they got Ted Hendricks, right? They have so many players starting for them. Lester Hayes, so many players for them who were just absolutely timeless. The Oilers, meanwhile, not a bad team. 8-6. If you added a couple more teams into the playoffs at this time, they might have snuck in. They were, like I said, in the first round, they were just a whisker away from winning the divisional title against the Steelers, which would have been a huge upset for the era. Wish it had happened, but unfortunately it didn't. Steelers were the ones who made it to the playoffs. They had Dan Pastorini, who was a pretty solid quarterback for them. And I want to bring up a game that I've hinted at for a while, because earlier I brought up their game against the Packers that ended with this crazy touchdown. Well, later in the year, and I also talked about this a little bit when I brought up John Reeves of the Cincinnati Bengals, who we've determined is better than Tom Luck of the Browns. Which, by the way, we talked about the Browns earlier and didn't bring up Tom Luck, and now the Browns are eliminated. So he's dead. It's gonna be crazy tomorrow when the headlines are Tom Luck, former NFL quarterback, dies.
Well, his name is Terry Luck.
Terry Luck, great. That's how memorable he is. I can't even get his first name right. Well, Terry Luck is not on either of these teams. He's not on the Bengals or the Oilers. But this game happened in Week 7. Both of these teams came in with pretty poor starts to their year. The Oilers were 3-3. The Bengals were 2-4. Both of them really felt like this is one of their last chances to win and to really get that playoff push and feel like they can still be contenders here at the midpoint of the year. Both of their quarterbacks are injured, so neither of them can start the game. Ken Anderson is out with an injury. Dan Pastorini is out with an injury. I mentioned earlier the Bengals went to John Reeves, a timeless journeyman quarterback who had some pretty horrific stats, but lasted a pretty darn long time in the NFL and the USFL, as it happens. The Oilers turn to none other than John Hadel, who was one of the AFL, the American Football League, was one of the best quarterbacks in that league before it merged with the NFL. He played so many years with the Chargers, and then played a little bit with the Packers, played a little bit with the Rams, and then ended his career here with the Oilers in 1977. And performances like this one against the Bengals are why. He goes 5 of 10 for 17 yards, threw an interception, and was so bad, just like John Reeves was so bad that their hurt starting quarterback had to come into the game and further risk an injury. Same thing happened with the Oilers. They sent Dan Pastorini in the second half, and still neither of them can really score. But the Oilers come back from being down 10-0 to force overtime, and the game gets tied 10-10, goes into overtime, and Dan Pastorini's efforts are moot because the Bengals win with a 22-yard field goal. That later down the line may have actually kept the Bengals out of the playoffs, because if the Oilers had won this game, and then they would have had a sweep over the Bengals, and they would have had a pretty decent divisional record, and I think they might have actually had a better divisional record than the Steelers. So if they had won this game, so this ridiculous overtime game that where these two backup quarterbacks play so bad that the hurt starting quarterbacks have to come in ends up playing a huge factor down the line. So all that to say, the Oilers just narrowly missed out and just narrowly weren't good enough. I do want to bring up a couple guys on their coaching staff. Of course, they have Bum Phillips, who I know, as a Houston sports fan, I don't know how much you actually care about the Oilers, that they existed at one point. So you may know about Bum Phillips, but do you know Bum's actual first name?
I don't know his actual first name.
I just learned this a couple days ago while researching stuff for this team. It's Ole. And can you spell Ole for me?
Okay, I'm gonna go.
And that's how it's pronounced. It makes no sense how it's written.
I'm gonna go OLE.
It's OAIL. And it's pronounced Ole. And apparently he's named Bum Phillips because he got stung by a bumblebee, and his sister or his aunt could only say bum, because they're from the South. So
that's just how you got named.
So that's how he got named Bum.
Like, my aunt only knew 7 words, and one of them was peanut butter. So that's why. Man, dude, they come up with the dumbest reasons for nicknames. Like, I would be like, nah, dude, I'm not going by Bum. Screw that. That's a bad name. I'm sorry. I'm sorry she doesn't know many words, but she's got to learn some more syllables. Oh, man, that's a great story. Who else is on that coaching staff?
Well, none other than Bum Phillips' son, Wade Phillips, who would later become the head coach of the Buffalo Bills, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Texans, right? Yeah, so he becomes a Houston head coach and is a way better defensive coordinator than he ever was a head coach. Not that he was a bad head coach, but he was just usually had some pretty dynamic defenses. And also a guy by the name of King Hill was their receivers coach, who, believe it or not, was the first pick in the 1958 NFL draft. And in my opinion, is one of the biggest draft busts in NFL history, but it's just never talked about. So I think that's a story for another day. But, yeah, pretty crazy names on this coaching staff. And one more point about Bum Phillips. He's also connected to a player who I definitely need to do an episode at some point, because he's one of my favorite players I've ever learned about. His name is Guido Merkins. And the best way I can tease it is he's the 1970s version of Taysom Hill, but in a much crazier way. and
oh my God.
And so I'm excited to talk about him at some point. And is he in the NFL at this point? I'm just going to check really quick. No, he doesn't come into the NFL until the year after this. But he is connected to Bum Phillips in more ways than one. But that being said, we're talking about Oilers-Raiders here. And, yeah, I just don't know if the Oilers were that good. They were decent. They're good. And if they went up against the Browns or the Seahawks, they definitely would be going on to the next round. But we're talking about the cream of the crop here with the Oakland Raiders. So that would be my pick. But what do you think?
Well, you know what? You know I don't want to go against my team. You know I don't want to go against Houston. But
And it sucks because this is one of the better Houston Oilers teams, like, throughout their franchise's history. So, you'll have plenty of Oilers teams that win like 2 games the whole year, or have Archie Manning as their quarterback, and you're like, what the heck is going on? But this is one of the better ones, so it sucks they had to go up against the Raiders here.
They weren't going to win the Super Bowl. They weren't the best team in 1977, so I knew their death date was going to come. And, the biggest problem with the Oilers is when you think of Dan Pastorini, you think of him with an ice pack on his shoulder and an arm sling. He's perpetually injured. Had he had a season full, clean bill of health, maybe he's a Pro Bowl quarterback and they're actually good. But it just seems like he's always one step away from the emergency room. And the difference between the Oilers and the Raiders is simple. The Raiders just had a better offense. It was probably the best offense in the league this year. It's probably either them or the Cowboys. The reason why the Cowboys are better than the Raiders is because of the defense of the Dallas Cowboys. But offensively, Ken Stabler and the Raiders are too much for the Houston Oilers here. It pains me to put them to sleep, but it had to be done.
Well said. Some of these tangents specifically I go on are like just ridiculous. But
no, it's like this show is meant for somebody to do mushrooms.
And just listen to someone talk about the NFL for 3 hours.
Do you want to take a break, or do you want to finish?
Nah, I'm good. I'm just
okay. Let's do it.
Some of these things I bring up and talk about, I'm like, what is wrong with me?
I know.
Okay. Kicking the Oilers out.
All right.
Cool.
My turn next.
The
Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay.
Wish they had gone up against the Oilers. I think you could have made a good choice. Good argument for the Oilers. And the Cardinals. Oh, that's a bummer.
Man.
I would have loved to have the Cardinals sneak in all the way. But we'll see. We'll see what you argue. Maybe you'll convince me.
I don't think so. All right, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers and the St. Louis Cardinals. Look, the Steelers only had 2 more wins than the St. Louis Cardinals. That's a start, but honestly, it's tough to make the case for St. Louis. I mean, yes, they have an all-time great quarterback there, but this Steelers team had a slightly better offense. Franco Harris, had a top 5 season at running back this year. The strength of this defense, the strength of this team was the offense. Between Bradshaw and Franco, they were able to put points on the board. And you look at the advanced statistics, it's pretty simple. Steelers offensively, 3.9 SRS. Let's look at the Cardinals, 2.6. That's 1.3 less. The Cardinals, minus 4.0 defensive SRS. Steelers, positive 2.3. That's a 6-point differential. It's hard to make the case that the Cardinals are better than the Steelers.
Yeah, well said. I think the fact that we have a team in the second round that lost to the Buccaneers is kind of crazy, and I think it only happened because they went up against the other team that lost to the Buccaneers,
Yeah.
who was a much worse team than the Saints. So I think, it's kind of no-brainer. It's unfortunately. Did you know that at one point the Steelers and Cardinals were the same team? That
What do you mean?
during World War II, I believe it was the 1944 season or 1943. It was only for 1 year. They merged as one team because teams needed to save money, so they were known as Card Pit.
That's what they decided on, Card Pit.
Card
I feel
Pit.
like that's the worst of all the scenarios. Like, you could have done anything else, honestly. And Card Pit is the worst possible mixture of words.
And either the year before or after that, the Steelers were merged with the Eagles, and they were known as the Steagles.
That is also pretty bad, but
And Card Pit, who I, again, making shout outs to future episodes I want to make, are one of my favorite teams in NFL history because they lost every game. And if they were in a list with like the Buccaneers, I think we might finally have a team that the Buccaneers can go to the next round against.
even a team that has the best of both worlds mixed together is that bad. That is exciting. Well, who do we got? Who do we got next? Who are you defending?
Let's see, only 4 teams left.
Okay.
We have the
Oh
New York
my
Giants.
gosh. All right. And who are they going up against?
I cannot believe they're in this round. Are there any? No, all 3 of these teams are too good. It's unfortunate. We're not going to have any crazy teams in the next round, unless I can convince you that the Giants.
Try your darndest.
All right, let's look at the New York Giants. I guess we'll start off with the Miami Dolphins. Who were they? They didn't even make the playoffs. Don Shula, washed. This is coming off the 76 season where they went 6-8. They weren't even that good the previous year. Of course, we're talking about 1977 here, where they do have the 3rd best scoring offense and 5th best scoring defense. My goodness, how did this team miss the playoffs? But passing-wise, Bob Greasy and those glasses, they didn't help him. The Dolphins only have the 16th best passing offense in terms of yards, which isn't very good. That's literally below the half mark in 1977. Defense-wise, the 24th best passing defense, which is the 4th worst in the league. So really, there's some numbers that they definitely could have improved on. So if those 2 things, passing, both offensive and defensive, they could have improved, maybe they would have been a playoff team, but they didn't. And that's why we're here with them sitting as a 10-4 team, wondering what could have been. Bob Greasy might have led the league with touchdown passes, with a whopping 22 of them, but it didn't seem to matter. Rushing, on the rushing side of things, as a team, they ran pretty well. They had a guy named Benny Malone lead them with just 600 yards, but he did lead them, but he wasn't the only. It was kind of a 3-4 horse attack that they had going on here, because they had Gary Davis with 500 yards. They had Leroy Harris with 400 yards. They had Norm Bulak with 400 yards. So they had a lot of options they were going to. All of these guys averaged at least 4 yards a carry. And they also had another guy named Don Nottingham who averaged 4.9 yards per carry. So a lot of pretty good stats that we're looking at here. But hey, games are not written on paper, right? Games are not, I guess they are written on paper. Games are not played on paper, I should say. The New York Giants, they only lost 5 more games than the Dolphins did. No big deal, right? Like, I think you could definitely make a case that the Giants were slept on. They were the sleeping Giants, is how I would say them. I am clicking on absolutely every team other than than the Giants trying to get to them. I clicked on like 17 pages. I cannot
Yeah.
I cannot bring up the New York Giants.
Look, we have to just put this to bed. The Giants suck, and the Dolphins don't. And I was looking for any way. I was like trying to see, did the Giants beat a team that happened to beat the Dolphins this year? And the answer is no. All season, the Dolphins only lost to respectable teams. This team would not screw the pooch against a shit Giants team, Nate. You know, Bob Greasy, yes, the offense was ranked 16th, but Bob Greasy got the 4th most MVP votes in that season. Like, I guess people thought that he was having a heck of a year, even if the stats say 16th ranked offense. They had a great defensive rookie of the year linebacker in A.J. Doohy, so Giants don't have a shot. I mean, the Dolphins advance. As much as I want to, have chaos, this show doesn't work if we don't genuinely believe the bullshit we say. So I'm going Dolphins.
Yeah, I think that's definitely easy. I do find it a lot of fun to talk about these bad teams. I wonder if, when we're done talking about all 60 Super Bowl years, we go back and we try to find the worst team in every season and see who would lose every game.
We can definitely identify who's the worst team of each season. I think we both are in agreement on the Bucks, right? This year?
Yeah, it would have to be. But the Saints make a pretty good case for it, I think.
Yeah, you're right. We'll have to look at that. But for now, I think we'll go Bucks. I like how you're spinning it. All right, I've got the Rams. Okay, I got the Rams. Who do I got next? Oh my gosh!
It's gonna land in the middle. Oh,
I got the NFL logo. Oh, the Baltimore Colts. Okay, so you know what? This is actually a pretty damn good deal. I mean, both these two teams had the exact same record, 10-4, 10-4. Both these two teams lost the first time they had an opportunity to play in the postseason. The Rams lost by 7 to the Vikings. The Baltimore Colts lost by 6 to the Oakland Raiders. You look at the advanced statistics between these two teams. It's 3.6 to 3.8 on the offensive OSR. The one big difference, though, is the defensive SRS. That's 4.6 for the Rams, 1.5 for Baltimore. So I think you kind of look at it, the difference between these two teams is probably the offense. And you take into consideration that the quarterback for the Baltimore Colts, Burt Jones, is slightly on the downswing. I think you just have to feel a little bit better about the quarterback situation because, yeah, it started off with Joe Namath, but Pat Hayden actually was halfway decent. I mean, he had an 11 touchdown to 6 interception ratio, which is actually pretty damn good for that point in time. His completion percentage was 56.5%, and they had a good running back in Lawrence McCutcheon who had 1,200 yards. So between these two teams, Nathaniel, I actually like the Rams, but who do you think should advance the next round?
This one is so hard. I think they're so evenly matched. There are plenty of alternate universes where this was the Super Bowl matchup and we got a heck of a game. But like you said, both of them lost in the first round. So we were robbed of that opportunity. And it's just so close. I mean, it also kind of depends where we're talking about when this game would happen. Would it be at the end of the year? Would it be at some other point in the year? Because the Rams, middle of the year, they're 4-3, and then they rip off a 6-game winning streak and go 10-3. The Colts, meanwhile, start off 9-1, so they're one of the best teams in the first 10 weeks of the year, and then they lose 3 games, and then win one more, and then end up losing in the playoffs. So it's like their whole second half of their year just collapsed. I think if it's at the end of the year, though, just based on that, based off the momentum of what happened, I think the Rams would have that momentum. Again, we also don't even take into factor where the game would be. I guess maybe it would be a neutral site. I guess it's a Super Bowl, right? We're pretending this is a Super Bowl matchup.
Yeah.
So this is in New Orleans, I guess. I think the Rams would win it by a whisker. It would be a close game, and it would be a fun game. That being said, it'd probably end up being like 17-2 or something, and would not be a very interesting game. But I think the Rams would take it just slightly.
Okay, so we have the 7th team into round 3. It's time to do it all over again, with one of the 7 teams actually getting a bye. So Nathaniel, once you have the
spin a wheel
of,
and pick out who gets the bye?
Yeah, let's do that first.
Okay, gotta add all the teams back. Cowboys, Vikings, Broncos, Raiders.
Steelers, Dolphins, and Rams.
Okay, who gets the bye week?
All right, let's see. Oh, look at you. Oh, you can't have it all, can you? Oh, wow. You even volunteered for the first spin. I don't know what kind of sleight of hand bullshit magic you pulled, but the Cowboys advance to the next round.
Wow. I think this is the sports gods telling us that the Cowboys really were the best team this year, and we are like stupid for even wasting our time doing this.
Well, there's a process. Let's figure out what 2 teams you got to fight for.
Wonderful.
All right, the Dolphins, the team you can't kill. And the Pittsburgh Steelers. You hate both these teams so much. I can just tell you hate these teams. And I think it pains you that one of them will advance to another round. So I look forward to hearing your case here.
I'm kind of curious why you think I hate the Dolphins.
I just feel like you aren't as enthusiastic about them as you are for some of these other teams, but you know, maybe I just am misremembering it. I mean, I know you're pretty excited about. I mean, the fact that you called them out for being average on offense, I think, is why I think you hate them.
I think I was trying to talk up the Giants.
Yeah, it's clear you hate the Steelers more.
Yeah,
it's clear you hate the Steelers more.
If this was another year, I think I would have a lot more hate to the Steelers. If this was 1978 or this was 1975 when they played the Cowboys in the Super Bowl and beat them, I would be a little more bitter. That being said, I can throw out my bias here and talk about this. I mean, look, on paper, the Dolphins have more wins than the Steelers do. They're 10-4. I've said it throughout the episode. It aggravates me that there wasn't more than 4 teams in the playoffs because the Dolphins would have easily been in it. They won more games than the Steelers did. They should have. I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole and say division winners don't deserve it. They obviously do, in my opinion. But we do deserve the Dolphins to get in. They had 10 wins. They had more wins than the Vikings did, who won their division. They had more wins than the Bears did, who made it as a wild card team. They were just unfortunate that the Raiders won 11 games and didn't win their division because the Broncos decided to be good for 1 year, and so the Dolphins got screwed over, which I think is unfortunate. When I look at their point differential, the Dolphins had a pretty good 116. They scored 313 points while allowing 197 points. The Steelers only had a point differential of 40, which is not even the best in their division. The Oilers actually had a point differential of 69, which was better than Pittsburgh's. I just think the Steelers were. This was kind of a down year for them, which again, 9-5 is not a bad year. They're seventh in scoring offense. They were not a bad team, but when you're talking about the 1970 Steelers, this was a down year. They didn't even make it to the second round of the playoffs. They lost to the Broncos. They let them take the Thunder that year. So to me, if they played the Dolphins in the postseason, I like the Dolphins. They have that kind of tenacity to them. I think that they have both a really good offense and a really good defense, whereas the Steelers were kind of a little all over the place. I'd say that the Dolphins missed the playoffs on a technicality more than they actually miss the playoffs. That's me arguing against NFL history that actually happened, but I think they deserve to make it. And I think they would have made a decent playoff run if they were given the opportunity. And I think they deserve to go on to the next round in our argument, regardless of who they're facing. That is only to say because the Cowboys got a bye week. But I think the Dolphins are one of my favorite teams from this year, and they deserve to make it to the next round.
Well, you know what? You've convinced me. You've made some cases where I've disagreed with you, but I'm advancing the Dolphins to the Final Four. So in 1977, they did not make the playoffs, but here on 13th Take, I am advancing them to essentially a conference championship type game. So our underdog so far is the Dolphins. You made a great case. Statistically, the Dolphins are better in both areas as well. So also the Dolphins really only lost close games in those 4 losses, and they were to very good teams. All right, who do I got? All right, Las Vegas Raiders, let's go. The Raiders. All right. The Raiders and the Rams. So this is a tough matchup, man. And, the reason being is you have a Rams team that won the NFC West Division, a Raiders team that didn't. Rams got eliminated first game in. The Raiders at least advanced to the conference championship and only lost by 3 points to the Denver Broncos. The thing is, the Rams had a much better defense than the Raiders. When you look at the advanced statistics, it's a 4.6 to 1.6 swing. The difference is the Raiders had an impeccable offense. It's a 5-point swing in favor of the Raiders at 8.8 with that Ken Stabler-led offense with Biletnikoff and Dave Casper. So that's kind of my case of why you should go with the Raiders over the Rams, Nate, is statistically, as a whole, the offense was just better than the gap between the Rams' defense. And also, the quarterback situation in Oakland is just much more of a sure thing. You got Ken Stabler back there. You know how good he is as a gunslinger, and he showed you he was able to do that in the postseason when he put up 37 against Baltimore. If you had mashed him up with the Rams only mustered up 7 points against the Vikings. They wouldn't have had a shot.
Yeah, well said. I think, those Rams teams in the 70s, they were kind of like the 2020s Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They benefited off of a weak division. They had the Falcons, who were floundering every year. They had the Saints, who couldn't win games to save their lives. They had the San Francisco 49ers, who really hadn't found their way. So the Rams were able to win a lot of divisions because go to the playoffs a lot and have a nice record. because they played some weak opponents 6 times a year. So they benefited from that a lot. The Raiders, meanwhile, not that their division was always great, but this year they had the Broncos, who literally went to the Super Bowl in it. They had the Chargers, who were decent contenders, not a great team year in, year out, but decent. And the Raiders got stuff done, got shit done just about every year. And they this year didn't win their division, lost it by just a game. But like you said, I mean, their offense was just so dynamic this season, so much better than than Los Angeles's was. And really, despite the record being decent on the Rams, I don't know if there's really a lot to write off about them that we haven't said already. So yeah, for me, the Raiders definitely would move on in this one.
So with the last matchup, it's guaranteed that 3 of the 4 teams were going to be in the actual conference title games. So I don't know if we've discovered any new information other than the Dolphins are kind of underrated. But I look forward to seeing you, make this next argument. But first, you got to spin it. Let's see what teams you're going to get.
Yeah, and see which one I debate first. Oh, did I stop sharing the screen?
Yeah.
We'll learn together who I got. Broncos. All right. I'll do it in order of how the wheel, just so that this isn't a completely useless scenario.
All right, Vikings. Good. I was on the edge of my seat there.
Wonderful. Well, the Vikings and the Broncos. The Vikings narrowly won their division. The Broncos also narrowly won their division, but the Vikings did it over a pretty not great team in the Bears, who had Walter Payton. The Vikings slipped by. Obviously, they're off using the services of Fran Tarkenton. They have still the pieces from their dynamic defense from earlier in the decade. Still trying to shake off the fact that they've lost 4 Super Bowls at this point across the last 8-9 years. The Broncos, meanwhile, won their division over the Oakland Raiders, who you had spoken about earlier, how amazing they were with their offense. As good as the Raiders' offense is, the Broncos' defense is just flat out one of the better defenses in the league. You know, you've brought up the SRS earlier, and they have a 9.4 SRS, which is the best in the league, which even though their offensive SRS is not the best in the world at a 1.9, together that makes an 11.3, which is first in the league, even better than the Super Bowl winning Dallas Cowboys, who had a 7.8. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings didn't even have a positive number in either of their offensive or defensive SRSs. They had a -1 offensive SRS and a -0.6 defensive SRS. So, without a question, I think if these two teams met on the gridiron, had to have a head-to-head matchup, I think the Broncos would come away with it. The Broncos made it to the the Vikings made it to the NFC Championship game, and were kind of blown out by the Dallas Cowboys. They slipped past the Rams, who just a bit ago I think not that they should have not been in the playoffs, but weren't like playoff perennial team at this point, versus the Broncos, who I think definitely were ready for the big show and definitely showed that they were ready. They took down the Oakland Raiders of all teams. They took down the Pittsburgh Steelers. They took down the 2 biggest names in the AFC in this part of the NFL era. So to me, the Broncos probably, if this had ended up the Super Bowl matchup, which it very well almost did, because if the Cowboys had an off day against the Vikings, it would have been Broncos-Vikings in the Super Bowl. And I think Vikings fans would have been very heartbroken to know that their team had lost a 5th Super Bowl if they'd played against the Denver Broncos, and the Broncos would have won their first. But so yeah, Broncos for me. But what do you think about it?
No, I think it's clear. I mean, they just had obviously a better defense. Goes without saying. And then, Craig Morgan was a damn good quarterback this year. He got more MVP votes than Staubach. The NFL writers thought he had a comparable, if not better, season than the man he lost his job to in Dallas. So we have our Final Four locked in. Cowboys, Dolphins, Raiders, and Broncos. And now it's time to spin the wheel, Nate. Will we get a Super Bowl rematch, or will we end with the Super Bowl rematch?
Yeah,
there's a lot on the line.
We only have one NFC team left, by the way, so this is a AFC heavy.
All right, Dallas Cowboys.
We got the Cowboys. And it is going to be so crazy if we get the Broncos. That would
if the Dolphins end up being in the Super Bowl.
Oh, man, the Raiders.
Oh. All right. So let me start off with this. How about some advanced statistics? SRS. The Raiders' total SRS is 10.4. The Dallas Cowboys' SRS is 7.8. That is a big gap, my friend. That is a gap of like 2.2. Nearly 3 points in SRS. Ignore the fact that the Broncos had a better SRS and lost in the Super Bowl. Please ignore that fact. But, the difference between these two teams is it could have been a shootout between Ken Stabler and Roger Staubach if these two teams were in the same conference and met in the conference title game. It's not a foregone conclusion the Cowboys would have been able to stop the Raiders. I think we look back at this Cowboys defense and we overestimate how good it was. This was an average defense, literally 0.2, the most average number you could get. Yes, it had stars like Hollywood Henderson. Yes, it had the sack leader in Martin. Was Harold Martin was the sack leader, but this was a team with holes that I think Ken Stabler could have exposed. So that's kind of my case on what would have been, if those two teams played in the postseason, sign me up for that ball game.
Yeah, I think there are some Super Bowl matchups that we never got that, we were robbed for not getting it. We got Cowboys Steelers. We got Vikings Steelers. We got Rams Steelers. We got Cowboys Dolphins. We got to answer a lot of these questions. But we never got Cowboys Raiders in a Super Bowl. Instead, we got Cowboys Broncos. That kind of ruined it. But we got if this was the matchup, I think this would have been one of the all-time games, especially if it was in 1977, because both of these teams were just so evenly matched. It's really hard to say who would have come away with it from my point of view. I guess that's why we're doing this whole thing, though, right? I mean, to me, the Cowboys' defense is just so great around this time that it's hard to imagine, along with their offense. But the one offense that was better than the Cowboys this year was the Raiders. So, at least in terms of scoring, the Cowboys did have the upper hand in terms of yards. I want to throw one thing out there. I haven't gotten to talk about the Cowboys this whole time. It's been crazy that you've had to argue for them every time. But one thing I want to point out, the Cowboys were first in offense and first in defense in terms of yards. There are only, I want to get this number right, there are only 7 teams in NFL history who have ever been first in both of those categories, and only 4 of those are in the Super Bowl era. Just fun fact, can you guess who the last team to lead the league in both offensive yards and defensive yards are?
Gosh, like allowed, like you have a good defense or a bad
Yeah,
defense?
like literally the best offense and literally the best defense.
Dude, I couldn't even tell you other than maybe a middle New England Patriots team like from 2007.
That would be a great guess, but it's actually the 2010 Chargers who missed the playoffs.
What? Oh my god, that's unbelievable.
And they missed the playoffs because their special teams was so bad that they missed the playoffs.
Yeah, that's starting to ring a bell, but I don't think I realized they were ranked first in offense and defense, Nate. That is that doesn't make a good case for your Cowboys, by the way. That the comparable is the San Diego Chargers team that didn't make the playoffs.
Fair enough. I think, God, it's hard to look at a team that won in 1977 and say that who won the Super Bowl that year and say that they would have lost to the Raiders. I'm really trying to peel back the bias as I'm sitting here wearing this sweater. Man, it would have been so close. It would have been so close. I think I'm going to hate to do it because I know that's not the point of the show, but I think I'm going to have to advance the Cowboys on a very, very small
It's the right call. It's the right call. Look, the point of the show isn't to be entertaining. It's to be authentically right. Okay? We have a strict sense of moral values and ethics that we will not compromise. Like, this isn't First Take where we're going to have opposite opinions. You know, if we hosted First Take, there would be an episode where it's like, I don't think LeBron is the GOAT. And I'd be like, I agree. And then we would just agree for the rest of the show. That's how the show works, but the beauty is when we get to a Super Bowl, we're like, damn, the New York Giants definitely should not have been the Super Bowl champions in 2007. I say all this to say I know where we're going, but Nate, spin your wheel. Let's see. Denver Broncos, nail biter. All right, let's see who you get on the other end. Let's go. Drum roll, please. Miami Dolphins. All right, make the case, bro.
All right, I've been talking up the Dolphins for quite a while, and I'm going to continue to talk them up. A 10-4 team that had a better point differential than the team that won their division, the Baltimore Colts. They had only 10 fewer points in the point differential than the Broncos did. 116 for the Dolphins, 126 for the Broncos. In terms of SRS, the Broncos do have the upper hand on the defensive side of the ball, 9.4 versus a 3.5. But on the offensive side of the ball, the Dolphins have a 4.4 to the Broncos 1.9. I think this team, the Dolphins, were just built to win. They obviously didn't, but they were, like you said before, all of their losses were one score. 3 of their 4 losses were one-score losses, and they are a whisker away from being in the playoffs and being in that conversation. And I think I'm going to try to figure this out. If they had won their division, let's say the Colts had lost another game, and who would the Dolphins have played in the actual postseason? If they had just replaced
the Raiders?
they would have hosted the Raiders. That would have been a heck of a game. I think they would have man, now I'm not even sure about what I'm arguing right now because I don't know if they would have beat the Raiders actually. But,
yeah, you are just barking off a tree that you want to climb, but there's just nothing there.
Yeah.
I mean, like, dude, that defense from the Broncos was too damn good for really everybody other than the Cowboys, bro.
Yeah, They really were. Did these two teams play? They did not. Yeah, I wanted to get that underdog there to the finish line, but I don't know. The Broncos were just so good this year. I mean, even if their offense left a little bit to be desired, it didn't matter because their defense was so darn good. They had their defensive coordinator Joe Collier just really put it nose to the grind, getting everything he could out of that team, and stayed the defense. Actually, by the way, this guy stayed the defensive coordinator of the Broncos from 1972 all the way to 1988. That is 16 years. He was in that like assistant coach kind of position. Kind of crazy, and he was, the Orange Crush defense was what it was. It was one of the more dynamic defenses, a forgotten defense for sure, and I think probably forgotten because they didn't win the Super Bowl and they didn't actually finish the job against the Cowboys. But regardless, I think they deserve to be remembered as a great team.
So, look, I'm going to advance the Broncos. I'm going to finish this off by giving you some stats. The entire regular season, the Broncos only allowed more than 14 points to one team. That's it. It was just 24 points to the Raiders in a loss. Every other game, they held the opponent to 14 points or less. So that 24-14 loss to the Raiders, that was the only game all season this Broncos team didn't get a turnover. They had turnover or multiple turnovers in every other game, including the 3 postseason games, 2 turnovers in the Cowboys game. The highlight of the season was an 8-turnover game in a win over the Raiders, 30-7. They also had a 6-turnover game against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I mean, this is a defense that was absolutely historical. But you look in the names, they aren't household names. You look at the defense, and none of them stick out to me as names I know, which is sad because, you should want to know them. But the guy who led them in interceptions was strong safety Bill Thompson. They had a guy, Louis Wright, at cornerback, and I think the leader was a linebacker by the name Randy Gradishar, who was a Pro Bowler, and so was Lyle Alzaldo, a right defensive end. So I say all this to say the finals is the Super Bowl between the Cowboys and the Broncos, and there's no suspense. The Cowboys and the Broncos played in the Super Bowl. The Cowboys blew out the Broncos. I will not even entertain a debate. Spin the wheel. Spin the wheel. We have the Cowboys. Okay, spin the wheel on the next one. Let's see who the next team is. We have to do this all the way through. The Broncos. Okay. So I'm going to concede the Super Bowl. To me, there is no argument. The Dallas Cowboys are the best team in 1977. I now present you one of 2 options. You can do the craziest thing ever and say, fuck you, Daniel. I think the Broncos were better. Or you can take this opportunity to send us to bed with a beautiful victory lap. You spent the entire show not being able to talk about this Cowboys team. Somehow, I got the pick 3 times, and the other time was a bye. So I think in honor of the ending being quite anticlimactic, I'll give you your time on the Dallas Cowboys in 1977.
Sure. So about this matchup, it's not very often that we get 2 opportunities, 2 games where an AFC and an NFC team played each other in the same season, especially in 1977, because as I'm looking through the Cowboys or the Broncos season, They only played one NFC team, and it was the Cowboys. There at the very end of the year, which they lost 14-6, and they would also end their postseason with a loss to the Cowboys. They lost 27-10 in Super Bowl 12. So, yeah, I think this was the matchup that needed to happen for 1977. These were clearly the best two teams. It is very interesting that through all the work we did, and I know it seems like we did the easy thing and picked the Super Bowl teams to make it to the Super Bowl. But, I think what I've learned through this is that there were a lot of teams that really just weren't that good. I think, look, you brought up 2007. I think that will definitely, I mean, hands down, it should be the Patriots, right? But
Yeah.
I don't think the Giants should even be in that Super Bowl. Like, there will definitely be years that we come across that the two best teams did not make it to the Super Bowl. But in this year, in 1977, I think without a question, everything fell into place the way it should have. That being said, this Super Bowl was, from start to finish, not even a close contest. The Cowboys jump out to a 10-0 lead. Tony Dorsett, the rookie superstar that he is, scores a touchdown. Later in the game, they actually have a running back, Robert Newhouse, throw a touchdown pass. They're just playing with the Broncos at that point to go ahead 27-10. And yeah, just they force 8 turnovers, which I think is probably still a Super Bowl record. The Broncos commit 8 turnovers in this game. The Cowboys defense is just so dynamic. Craig Morton throws 4 interceptions. The other turnovers are fumbles. None by Morton actually, but they're just completely overmatched. Craig Morton and Norris Weiss of the Broncos, they combined to have some of the worst performances by quarterbacks in Super Bowl history. There's a great quote that I've lived and died by as a Cowboys fan, as my life as a NFL researcher and all that, is that Craig Morton always dreamed of winning a Super Bowl for the Dallas Cowboys. And on Sunday, he did just that. Because
That's brutal.
it was just not a good game for him, and it's unfortunate because Craig Morton, of course, was the Cowboys quarterback in the early 1970s, late 1960s. He lost the job to Roger Staubach, very much to the chagrin of Tom Landry, who did not like Roger Staubach's style of play. He very much wanted Craig Morton to win, kind of like how I really wanted to advance the Dolphins throughout this whole thing. But, on paper, the Broncos were just better. But the Cowboys, I mean, this team was just absolutely dynamic. I think any team that they had played this year, they would have kicked their butts. They, from top to bottom, their coaching staff. I mean, you got Tom Landry, one of the greatest coaches of all time, right? You got Mike Ditka as their special teams coach. He obviously later coached the Bears to a fabulous 15-1 record and won a Super Bowl in '85. Dan Reeves, who used to play for the Cowboys, he was the offensive coordinator. He would later become a head coach. They got Gene Stallings as their defensive backs coach. He's pretty notable for that. He was also, I think, a longtime college coach. Pretty successful as a college coach. Actually went to Texas A&M. I know that's a team you're a fan of. So this is when the Cowboys were just absolutely clicking on all cylinders. I know there's a lot of laughs and a lot of talk about the 90s Cowboys and how fans kind of look back at those years. But to me, the 70s Cowboys just have so much mystique and so much glory. This is before, the fans kind of got big-headed about things, and this is when they were really America's team. This is when that terminology was born, was in this era. So to me, it like when I look back at teams that I wish I could have watched, and teams that I wish that the Cowboys would play like today, like this is definitely one of them. Like they are one of the better NFL teams, I think, to ever grace the field, and I think they're a little forgotten, and I think that's maybe because they're stuck in the murk of They played the Broncos, and I think a lot of people write off the Broncos like this one-off team because they only went to this one Super Bowl. But as we've learned through the course of this, the Broncos were a pretty darn good team. I think if the Cowboys had slipped up and the Vikings had made the Super Bowl, or the Bears had somehow made the Super Bowl, the Rams, I think the Broncos would have definitely won a Super Bowl. So I got to give them their flowers. They were solid. They just were not going to beat the Dallas Cowboys on the actual Super Bowl day or in our hypothetical scenario. Like, the Cowboys were without a doubt the better team, the best team this year, which I'm sure that everyone watching this and listening to this absolutely loves hearing, because I just know people love hearing Cowboys fans gloat about the team.
Well, we certainly couldn't talk about the year 2026 when it comes to the Cowboys. We had to go all the way back to 1977. That's what we do on 13 Take. It took us probably like 3.5 hours to find out that the team that won the Super Bowl was in fact the best team, but it's been a fun exercise. I'm glad we started it off on a positive note for your Cowboys.
There won't be many more.
No, you got like 4 more. My vow is to have more Hollywood Henderson stories for you the next time we talk about a Cowboys team from this era, but I love the way you talked about them. You know, they're just a cohesive team. They got famous before. People said dumb stuff in the media. So I don't think people picked up on how crazy Tony Dorsett or Hollywood Henderson was. And there was a certain mystique and respect that Drew Pearson and Roger Staubach had that Michael Irvin maybe didn't necessarily have. So it's a beautiful first team to talk about. I guess we can end it with this. Nate, can you pick another random year?
Yeah.
And we'll circle back in about a week or so.
I'm gonna laugh when it picks 1977 again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Okay,
people
so
with that one less dopamine rush.
You know what? I'm going to share the screen.
I hope it's 2025.
Come on, hurry up. Okay, so for some reason this book goes all the way back to 1900. So I'm going to have to unclick all this.
What year did the league start?
1920. But I was only limiting it to Super Bowl years, which would be 1966. But if you want to do 1920...
No, we can do that after we get through the Super Bowl years. For sure. That could be a fun post Super Bowl project, but
we still have to do all 120 World Series or however many there have been. So,
well, we might have to go back to pre-Super Bowl of NFL football. That feels more important because, I don't know. We'll figure it out. First, we have to do a second episode.
So it only goes up to 2021. I don't know if you really care.
That's fine. We can pick up those other years later. It wouldn't be that fun.
All right. 1980.
Okay. All right. So
I was going to be really mad if it was another 1970 season.
All right. So I'll see you in about a week and a half. We will be talking 1980 NFL football. I'll probably have to get my Hollywood Henderson stories in sooner than I thought. Nathaniel, any last words, my brother?
Nope. I can't believe we actually did this. But, I'm excited for the 59 years we have left. And, yeah, maybe I'll feel like I'm 59 once we're done with this.